All right, let's go back to one of our top stories then this afternoon on the issue of bullying, which has become a common practice in most schools around the country with regards to who is to be held accountable in such cases and how schools can prevent bullying on their premises. We're joined on the phone by Clinical Psychologist Dr. Saths Cooper. Dr. Cooper, I'm glad we could get you on a better line. Let me just try to remember where I'd actually started. But Prof, one of the things, I was saying we should remember is the fact that in both cases we're dealing with minors. As difficult as it may be to contemplate it, that, even the one that was the aggravator in this case is indeed a minor. And I was asking how we as society should then be reacting to this bullying tragedy, given the fact that whilst we are sort of outraged and condemn the incident, rightly so, it might also then be a time for self-introspection, given the fact that children or minors certainly hold up a mirror to us as a society and show us the kind of society that they are living in, which in this case shows is a violent society. So how should we then be viewing all of this?
Well, you're absolutely right. We live in a very violent society. We live in a society where there's more violence than most other societies, except those that have war. And our children reflect what we impart to them. And this tragic incident tells us that those children have learned from their environment, that is the home, the social, and also the school environment. We as adults must accept responsibility for this. It cannot be that children do something in this crass and terrible manner and we blame our children. Our children are learning from us. They get socialized. The behaviors they exhibit are part of their living in such a terrible society. Schools ought to be places where children should be free to express themselves and according to norms that we impart to them. Very clearly, we have not imparted in our schools the kinds of norms we ought to. And in a few years' time, we'll be complaining about those who have left school causing problems in other spheres in life.
Yeah.
So it's a cyclical issue. It will continue. Indeed, in the adult sphere, if we look at the political, if we look at the other spheres, the amount of bullying that goes on, the amount of speaking over, the physical violence that is endemic in our expressions, in how we treat of each other, is what our children learn. This can happen in places like Parliament, in the videos that we see floating around of adults confronting each other in physical, brutal ways. Where on earth can our children find the correct and right conditions to grow and develop without expressing those symptoms? These children are expressing the symptoms of our malaise, our illness. We are a dangerously sick society, sliding more and more into a morass, particularly during the pandemic when we are focused very much on ourselves. We are looking at social media. Things like this get publicized, disseminated instantly all over. Other kids who may not have thought about it start mimicking and doing these because we live in such an insecure and uncertain environment. Our schools must restore that sense of real learning, consideration for each other. We need to entrench a sense of identity to our children so they know who they are and they can hold their own in any situation without resorting to this kind of negative and brutal reaction.
Yeah. Dr. Cooper, one of the things that I heard on one of the news clips that we played today on the back of that story was a resident in the area where the school is, where Mbilwi Secondary School is, saying something quite important, which I thought I could discuss with you. He said, if we had, either social workers, therapists, or in-house counselors at the school, maybe situations like this would have been prevented. But those kinds of things are kind of left or kept for the more sort of private schools or schools with more resources, and these kinds of schools are just left to kind of fend for themselves. I mean, a lot of people are saying, what's the school's role in this? And yes, we must talk about the school's role in it, but also the fact that there are less resources, and the fact that you don't have a counsellor. And many of the schools that are in Joburg, for example, for a fact that there would be either a counsellor or a therapist or someone that the children, the learners, can go and speak to. And it was sad for me to hear that there isn't even that at the school.
Well, the majority of our schools, in fact, those particularly on the periphery of the urban areas and the public government schooling system, have nothing like this. And there is need for this. There is need for counseling in schools. There's need for us to change our curriculum and those life skills that just become a sort of catch-all category needs to be reoriented to deal with our child in a society like ours, multicultural, and working to create self-esteem, working to create the kinds of interactions that the child will use in their repertoire of behavior without psychologically, physically, and emotionally turning in on themselves and on others. That can come, of course, with psychologists. But remember that psychologists intervene at the tertiary level. We ought to have prevention. It ought to be, and I've been saying this to you and other interviewers, Flo, that prevention is better than cure. We chase after quantities. We chase after figures instead of building, growing that child into a civic and responsible citizen. But if we've got leadership that's irresponsible, if we've got leadership that rails out against anybody out there, can you imagine the victimhood that our children are inheriting all around us? I think it's time to pause, particularly during this pandemic, and say it is now that we can actually connect with and relate to our children and actually work together to change the culture in our schools. Yeah. Because if we have a better socialization and a better education system, we're equipping those children for life. Our society will change. We won't be creating the misfits, the maladjustments, and the dropouts that are endemic year in, year out, and resulting in the tragic death of this child.
All right. It's unfortunate that we have run out of time, Dr. Cooper. I'd certainly like to chat more on this topic, but we'll do so at a later stage. Thank you, as always, for giving us your time, sir.
Thank you.